Well, good. Welcome back to another episode of Leaving a Rich Legacy with Jessica. This podcast is, if you've watched my podcast in the past, you know this is basically a love letter to my younger self. And what I mean by that is it's an opportunity to have conversations within the Black and Brown community that we don't often have, whether that's healing, self-love, financial literacy, talking about fertility and infertility, and then also just conversations that you would think that we would have discussed as kids, teenagers, young adults, and even as early as our 30s and 40s. Like there's just so many topics we don't touch and tap into. And this podcast allows me to do those things, but also brings those conversations to you, the audience. So I am super excited to have my cousin join me today. She is my first cousin. But I do have to share just a little funny story about why we're not on camera. So a tornado came through Dallas last week?
Friday.
So middle of last week, and then it's so bad weather and it made its way to Kentucky. So, well, you're right. So it would have been Friday, we had a storm, and then the weather passed through to Kentucky, caused a lot of damage. And then we tried to reschedule for Sunday, and some of the towers were still down Sunday in Kentucky. And then they're still down as of today. So we decided to turn our cameras off because we're going to make this conversation happen.
Yes,
We don't need any more interruptions. So we're hoping that with us having the cameras off, it will allow us just to have a seamless conversation, because this is a topic that I've been wanting to share, and Chaney has been so wonderful to agree to have this conversation with me. So super excited. So Chaney, let's start off with, so I've already said that you're my cousin, but tell us a little bit about Chaney Williams. Who are you?
Okay. My name is Chaney Williams. I have a MFA in creative writing poetry. I am also a full spectrum doula and a former student midwife. So I've been doing doula work since 2018. A full spectrum doula does all the spectrums of pregnancy, from miscarriage and loss to postpartum and labor and delivery. So yeah, those are just some things about me.
Okay. I love that you started off with things about you and who you are and more of your passions. So that's always important for me to highlight, because when you think about who we are outside of our professions, right, and
Mm-hmm.
our scholastic achievements, that's something that is important, because it's not necessarily what society has taught us what we're supposed to be. Like you're owning that part of you, which is really cool.
Yes, and I think, I don't know, there's a lot of pieces of my identity that have shifted as I've grown and evolved. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's really exciting to be having this conversation with you today. I'm really excited about it.
Okay. So tell me, and I have an idea and I've done some
Okay.
research, and I'll be honest with you, since I froze my eggs, January 2022, I've seen just the conversations about doulas come up a lot more, but it's come up actually in conversations where I didn't necessarily think like, oh, a doula can do that. So
Yeah.
what exactly is a doula?
So, a doula is someone who gives emotional support through, really, it could be through a lot of different life experiences. So, there's the whole pregnancy scope. There's also fertility doulas, there's sexuality doulas. I mean, there's grief doulas for like loss or transition, such as like a divorce. There is any kind of doula you could really think of, but they originally really started as pregnancy, like the full scope of that. And it's kind of evolved in like the last 10 years, which is amazing.
Okay. So I'm just going to be completely honest.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of all of that outside of pregnancy support. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I was just blown away with how I've seen it grown with supporting someone that's pregnant or that are,
Yeah.
in the process of bringing on a new baby, but
Conceiving,
it's
yeah.
expanded a lot.
It has, and I think it's really great because the thing that I've really realized since from being a doula and just different experiences I've had in my life that I've supported friends through is doulas are so useful for even really common things like even like grief. And I think that's one that really has been big for me because I think grief comes up in pregnancy a lot. So I know people who do grief doula work, and there's even like death doulas who help families make decisions and carry out like end of life practices as well and support for that scope, I would say, which is really amazing because I don't know, I think everyone deserves a doula in whatever capacity they would like it. And that even from pregnancy to divorce to gender things, whatever. I think it's really great that there are more doula roles out there and people doing different trainings.
So it's really that support, right? Whatever
Yes,
that looks
it's the
like, it's
emotional
providing
support.
support. Okay, awesome.
Yes, and in pregnancy, so let me, how do I want to say this? So starting out, with like fertility doulas. So you could be getting support through trying to conceive if you're doing a lot of like medical appointments or seeing a midwife or doing like in vitro, just different spectrums of that. It's really about the emotional support and having like an unjudgmental, unbiased like person to hold space for you through whatever life transition you are going through.
So
And
I'm
that's why it's
happy.
amazing.
I'm happy you mentioned that, because one of the reasons why I asked you to join me today, which now you've opened my eyes beyond my topic, which that is the reason why this podcast was created, but was really to learn more about how a doula can support a family that either it's going through a pregnancy or bringing home a baby and trying to navigate through that new normal, right? So what are some of the benefits of using a doula before, during, and after labor or bringing home a new baby?
So I think it's just having a person that, like with my doula package for births, like as a birth doula, I am on call for you starting at 36 weeks. And before that, as soon as we sign the contract, I give support through text or phone call, and I do prenatal appointments where we meet and we like make your birth plan. But it's really having that person who's in your corner who can also provide educational resources to help you make informed decisions about your birth or what you want to do postpartum or as you're trying to conceive. There's just so much to it. And I think it's really cool because it's customizable and it's I'm trying to think of the word, not personalizable. It's customizable to the person, whoever is going through or the family. Like even there's people who do help people with surrogacy if they're a surrogate, and people may be a doula for them as well. So I think it's really cool because you can make it into what you want. There's like a general scope. Like doulas do not provide medical interventions or stuff like that, unless like you were on the way to the birth and like the baby is coming in the car or something like that. But like doulas provide that emotional aspect and educational resources and help advocate for their clients as well, which I think is really important too, because in a lot of the hospital systems, people do not know about their choices they have around their care, even outside of pregnancy. So doulas can help clients make an informed decision about their care by giving them resources or bringing up questions, but also providing emotional support through text or phone call, whatever that their client needs. And that's the great thing about it, because it may look different for different clients, which is cool.
Okay. So the emotional support really is like the sky is almost a limit based on what that individual needs.
Yes, and what's involved with the individual doula as well, like what are in their services. Also, like during labor or even like prenatal appointments, doulas can show you like different comfort measures to help with labor, or if you're really uncomfortable because, you know, when you're pregnant, your body changes and you have more pains or like maybe some emotional things going on. Doulas can really provide that like massage or different things like that and help you prepare for the birth, but also be informed, like help the client be informed about going to their appointments with like either a midwife or a OB about what they want to ask more about too, and help them make informed decisions. And I think that's the big part about it that's really important to me, is showing pregnant people that they have choices and autonomy over their bodies, especially with BIPOC people.
I think it's one thing that I really wanted to capture with the last few episodes
Yeah.
of my podcast is just helping people realize that they have options, and
Yes.
you know, it doesn't have to meet the standard of someone else's experience. You can make it your own, or you can go whatever direction that you feel is necessary for you and your family, regardless of
Yes.
what society may say.
You can't see me, but I'm like waving my hands. So I'm like, heck yes,
That's the
yes.
most important part. Like, you know,
Yeah.
we get stuck in this box or what someone is saying that we're supposed to do and what's supposed to be
Yes.
normal, but that's not necessarily the case.
No, there's different scopes of normal for different people. And I think also it's so important because our society as a whole, like when we're in elementary school or high school, or like middle school, we don't really talk about reproductive choices that people have when they are pregnant or trying to conceive or postpartum. And that's such a huge disservice to people because they're really lacking education as a whole because it's not a societal norm for us. And I think that's where doulas really come in, is helping empower their clients and give them the tools they need to advocate for themselves or help them advocate in different medical lenses and like scopes and stuff like that.
Just your thoughts on this, but
Yeah.
I personally have noticed that, you know, there appears to be, and it could be social media. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Right now, we can see a lot more, but there appears to be more of a conversation about doulas and people embracing the idea. Do you, just from your experience or just your thoughts and perspective, why do you think that's so?
About, did you say about why people are embracing doulas more?
Why people are embracing the
Oh,
idea?
okay. I think it's because there's been a lot of conversations, which I'm really grateful for in the past, like even couple years, really past 5 years, about how there's so many, I mean, we know this, but there's a lot of inequalities and gaps in maternal or perinatal health care with Black and Brown people. And that is honestly really scary in a lot of ways. And I think we're trying to do a lot of systemic change to help bridge that gap and lessen it, because a lot of pregnant people or their families are getting hurt and not getting the care they deserve and need in different kind of medical systems. And so I think a really big part of that has been, there's been a lot of media about the fact that doulas can improve in a lot of ways maternal or perinatal health outcomes by providing that extra support and helping their clients advocate for themselves as well. So I think that's been a really big shift. And I'm glad it's happened and that people know they have that option and choice. Because I think a lot of the time, I mean, people don't know that they can refuse care for certain things. Like you can be like, no, I don't want that. I want to change providers, or I want to go to a different hospital. And yes, there are consequences with that, but I don't think people are aware, because of how our society is, that people have choice over their medical care. And that's also a big part of where doulas come in as well, by helping provide that support to educate people about that.
Are there any like common trends that you've seen as a doula that you think are important just to share with your experience?
Hmm. One of them, I guess, would say, I think, especially during the early parts of the pandemic, was a lot of people shifted to out of hospital birth, which I have different feelings about, because I think some people did it out of like a scarcity mindset where they did think they had choices. And with what was going on with the pandemic and COVID and the early parts of it, they weren't, it was really messed up because people weren't allowed to have support people at first in the hospital with them while they were laboring in certain hospitals. So a lot of people really shifted to out of hospital care, which I was in midwifery school to become a certified professional midwife who does home births. And that's specifically for patients who are low risk, which I think is great. And I love home births, they're amazing. But I think that shift, it really opened people's eyes up to being like, oh, I have choices outside of this. And the reason why I said I have mixed feelings about it is because I think some people felt pressured to do home births, not by like midwives or anything like that. I'm not saying that. But I think because they didn't have a lot of choices in the hospital. But I think it also gave more media and knowledge about doulas and midwives in general in a way that's really great, because people have more access to those options and knowledge about them. So that's been one I've really seen. What else? Sorry, there's a plane. What else? I guess, I mean, there's just so many different trends with doula work, I guess you would say. Even like the growth that there's been in different experiences with people having doulas, from like fertility doulas to sexuality doulas to postpartum work, which I think we had a really great conversation about. Was it a TikTok that you were talking about?
Yes.
Yes. And that's what I was thinking about. And I think it's really important because people don't focus on postpartum a lot. And it's kind of like forgotten. Like once you have the baby, your community is just like, well, you've had the baby, you don't need support anymore. But I think that really shifted in the past 5 years, where people are going back to having more support in the postpartum period, which is so important. Because it's really isolating when you just have a new baby and you're home alone and you may not have the support you got. And like a really cool thing I've seen trend wise is postpartum parties, where like people come and they support the family with like care during the postpartum period, or like meal trains or stuff like that.
So I love that idea. Never thought
Yeah.
about it with the postpartum parties, but
Yes.
it did make me think, because you talked about the TikTok. So I'll
Yeah.
share. So I remember seeing, so I believe it started on TikTok, and then of course it just makes its way across all social media platforms, where a younger Black couple, I say younger, they look like they were in their 30s,
Mhm.
hired a doula after the mother gave birth. And there was a lot of and I'm just speaking from what I could see on Instagram, but there was like a lot of backlash from people judging her, pretty much saying like, why is she bringing in the doula? She should be taking care of the child. And if I'm correct, the doula actually came in to support her at night to allow her to
Yes.
get some rest. I can't remember
I
if the
think that was
father
part of
worked
it.
overnight
Yeah.
or whatever it is, but still came in to allow her to get a break and get a proper night's rest. And it was just amazing, where I'm like, wow, that to know that's an option. Like I would love that, because,
It's so important.
when we talk about postpartum depression and a
Yes.
lot of things that people go through, why not? So what are your thoughts about just me sharing with you
Mhm.
just what I observed when that tweet or that TikTok, that video went viral. What are your thoughts about that?
So I didn't see the original TikTok, then I watched it, but it made me sad, honestly, that there was a backlash towards this new mother because I don't know, the things I was talking about, like postpartum is so isolating. The family as a whole has changed, and bringing in like a new baby home and you're so sleep deprived. I think it's so important that if you don't have access to family members who can help, or even if you do, I think it's important that if you want sleep, because sleep is crucial during that time. And I think there is nothing wrong with bringing in someone and paying them to do that because they are trained and skilled in that, like that's their scope. And I think it's really important. I don't think we should be shaming people about that. Like it honestly kind of disgusted me and made me sad that it's normalized in our culture that new parents should be sleep deprived and really struggling as they make a transition with their family when they bring their babies home, and we kind of forget about them. And so I think that's been a really big shift that at least I've seen in the birth community, where we're talking more about postpartum depression and how to support new families so they are not dealing with those kind of things. And then also as doulas, it's really important that if someone needs more support or like a referral to either like a mental health professional or something like that, because they're having postpartum psychosis or depression, etc., that they have those resources and know that they are not going to be judged or there's nothing wrong with them. Because honestly, it's really a lot more common than people know. People just don't talk about it and they're shamed for it. And that makes me really sad because that shouldn't happen. So that was my whole thing about it. Like, it just made me sad that these people were judged so heavily and like shamed about something that should be more normalized.
Exactly. And,
Yeah.
you think about it, there are families and people who've had
Mm-hmm.
nannies and
Yes.
all type of support over the years. So what's the difference of this individual family selecting a doula who can provide that support, especially if you can afford it?
Yes.
Then why not? Why not?
Yeah. And I think it's important that people know that that's an option, that they don't have to struggle alone in that, especially if I think, I don't know, it really made me upset when I saw that, I think, because they were just really shamed for it. And that's not fair because postpartum is really hard. And I don't know that from personal experience because I've never had children, but I've supported people and had friends. And I think it's important that we talk about it as a culture, that there are these common struggles that people repress a lot or they don't talk about because they don't want to be shamed.
Yes.
Yeah.
So good. Okay. So we got an idea of the emotional support that you can provide and some of the trends that you've observed. Are there any challenges for doulas?
Oh yeah. I mean, let's see. I think a challenge I haven't personally experienced, but I've heard of other doulas who have experienced this, is if your client is giving birth in a hospital, that there are challenges sometimes where the medical providers like nurses or OBs will think that you're trying to like take over. But really, I think that's important to me is that expressing and like meeting providers before. And like I had a really great doula friend who, when I first started out as a doula, was like, a big thing that's been really helpful for me is before I go to a new hospital, bringing cookies for the providers and nurses and be like, hey, you'll probably see me. This is who I am. Because that's not your role. You're not experienced or trained to be a medical professional. And I think really showing that you're there to work together as a team is so important. And yeah, like that's a challenge that I see a lot of people talk about, especially on Instagram. But I'm really lucky because I've worked with really amazing providers and nurses and midwives who love doulas, and they're really grateful when doulas are there. So I've been really lucky in that way, but that's a challenge I have seen on Instagram and like heard from other doulas before. Let me think of another challenge. There was one I was going to say. Oh, I guess. No, okay. I wouldn't say that one. I was going to say something. I don't think it really connects to that, but I guess a big challenge that there can be kind of pushback for, especially in certain hospitals, is like having a birth plan. But I think that's becoming so more common, especially in mainstream culture, that there's not as much pushback. I think sometimes if people don't know what a doula is, especially if they're like a kind of old school provider, they may think you're like very like hippy dippy and don't know what you're doing and don't have training. But I guess like a big thing is just educating people and being like, you know, I'm here to help make your job kind of easier, because doulas really help with the labor process, because a lot of the time, I mean, nurses and providers have their own jobs they're doing. And so as a doula, when you're at the birth, you can help like get water for the client or juice, or like go get them their partner meals at the cafeteria. And it's really like the teamwork, and really, like I was saying, showing that you're not there to like take over, because that's not your job. But your job is, I think it's really great to help them and show that you're there to make their job a little easier by like showing your client positions they can get in with like peanut balls and stuff like that, because that's your scope. And I think that's a big challenge I think people deal with.
From your experience,
Yeah.
and so neither one of us have children, right? So
Yeah.
I'm learning,
Yeah.
and I really don't. I hear the benefits, but I won't know until I decide to have children. So,
Yeah.
from your experience and just all of the knowledge that you have and hands-on experience, why do you think it's important to hire a doula?
I think everyone deserves a doula if they want one. And I think it should be, it's really great because a lot of Medicaid programs are getting more funding for doulas, which is important.
That's good. Okay.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, there's different viewpoints about it, but I think, especially in the doula community, I would say, because that's just the thing right now. But I think it really helps give that person the support they need that they may not be able to get from a provider. It's also important because they learn more about like what normal labor looks like and like what to expect, especially for a new parent with postpartum. I just think doulas are so invaluable because they do so many different things. It's really about making it the best birth experience possible for your client and being there to support them and what they need, as long as it is in your scope. And I think it's really important, especially for Black and Brown people and other BIPOC folks, because there are a lot of things that we see on the news and hear about or just see where there's inequalities with treatment and medical facilities with BIPOC people. And that's so huge. And I think really giving your clients and empowering them about their autonomy and their like choices they have over their own medical care is so important. And I don't know, I could just like go on and on about it, but I'll stop. But I just think it's just great because doulas, it looks very different for different people. And that's the cool thing about it. It's about making you have the best pregnancy outcome that you want to have, that is in your control. And if things shift as well, like I've had clients who've had to have like planned C-sections or stuff like that because baby was breech. I think it's so huge to have that support as well during those unexpected things where you have a person who can hold space for you and provide support and education during those like crucial moments, or be like, I think of it as like a translator between, I never speak for my clients without having conversations with them before, because that's not my role or my scope. But I think it's important to be like, oh, do you need to ask more questions about that? Do you need time to think about that? Is there time to think about that? Like, it's a big decision. And just having like that unbiased person, but who also knows you and has known you for a long time and been through the pregnancy with you as well.
You know, one thing that I really got from what you said is you may think that it's not within a doula scope, but ask, because you really can possibly customize it based on your needs. And if you're not sure, you know, reach out and ask questions. Just for my awareness, the process of selecting a doula, is it usually like a consultation? What does that look like?
So there's a bunch of different ways you can find doulas. One of the ones that I've had people find me a lot is either by word of mouth, or there's a site called Doula Match, which is really great. And you can just Google that, and you can put everything from like looking for a doula who has experience with surrogacy, or doulas who have experience with supporting siblings, or like it categorizes, you can put down like you're a Black doula or an Indigenous doula and stuff like that. So that's really great. But with basically, it's like an interview process. The client is interviewing you, and you're also interviewing them to make sure you are a good fit. And a thing I do is, if I do not think I'm the best fit for the person or the family, I'll refer them to someone who I think is, because I'm not going to be the right doula for everyone. And that is totally fine. So usually what I do is I do a consult that's totally free, either by Zoom or like we meet and get like tea at a coffee shop or something like that. And I just give them my background. I tell them about my services. I bring like a copy of my contract so they can look at it, because it's more detailed. And I always tell them, like, you have time to think over this. You have like, just contact me if you have any more questions, that kind of thing. Because you want to make sure you're the right fit for each other, because birth is such a sacred space. And just like the whole spectrum of pregnancy as a whole, it's like a very tender and raw part of someone's life. And if I do not think I'm the best person to support them, I will refer them to another doula who I think would be a great fit. And I think that's important too. So it's basically like you're interviewing each other, which is cool.
And that says a lot about you, because some people are so caught up in the money that they don't realize that not only are you a good fit for this family, but are they a good fit for you?
Yeah,
it goes both ways.
I think it's important, and I'm really grateful that in Kentucky there's such a big doula community and like reproductive community, that they're really supportive of each other. And I think it's like that everywhere from what I've seen. But it's really great that we work together and we're like, hey, actually, like, I don't know if I'd be the best doula for you, but I have 3 other people, or like my time is full at that time. I have other people who I'll be on call for. But here's a list of like other people that I think would be great for you, and just referring out.
Well, Chaney, is there anything else that you can think of that we should know about a doula that maybe you haven't covered yet?
I feel like I've talked a lot.
Okay. Well, what about,
do you have any specific questions of things that like I didn't cover?
No, I'm just asking, like, as you think back, if there was one thing that you could leave with when it comes to understanding the doula a doula and the benefits that they can provide, is there anything else that you think you can that you would like to share, I should say?
I guess I think there's a really big misconception that doulas are the same as midwives, which they're not. And like I get that question a lot where like people think I'm a midwife or vice versa. And it's really different because, like I was saying, you know, midwives catch the baby. This is how I always explain to people. I'm like, midwives catch the baby. Doulas are there to give emotional support and comfort measures during labor or different scopes of the pregnancy. And that's just a thing I think comes up a lot. That's like the only thing I can think of. I don't know. It's really important to me that if people want to have a doula, they have access to one. Because I think it's a really important part of the reproductive process if people want one. It's important they have access to it because everyone deserves a doula.
I love it. Everybody deserves a doula,
They do
and deserves to know their options.
Yes, they deserve it. If that's what they want and what they need, they deserve access to that. And I think that's very vital for me.
Now, I know I would assume you said it like, are you a good fit? And I guess I would encourage anyone who is looking for a doula and may have interacted, just like when I was thinking about a fertility physician for my egg freezing, I wanted to make sure that was a good relationship. So just because you have one bad experience or an experience that you don't think went well, don't limit yourself. Find another option.
Yes, that's what I was gonna say. It's like, I hate to use the word like shopping around, but like you should look at all your options before. And that's something a good doula will encourage, is be like, hey, I know you're interviewing other people. Take your time. This is like, if I have other interviews, I'll tell people and be like, this is my capacity, but you take your time thinking about it because it's your birth. It is about you and what's right for you and your family. So yeah, I think really not jumping into it and being like intentional about who you choose is important too. And a good doula will not pressure you into being like, you need to sign the contract now. Like, yeah, I don't know. That's just a thing I think is important. And knowing that you have options and choices.
That's it. This is what this is all about, is
it's about
knowing
your
that you have options.
Yes, it's about helping people, because of how our society is, realize that they have more autonomy and absolutely autonomy over their bodies and able to make the right choice for them and their families. And I think that's like the big thing for me with doulas, is they provide those resources and advocacy.
Well, Chaney, I appreciate you joining me today. I've learned quite a bit. And I think it's important that, anyone watching now knows that you don't just have to be experiencing going through a pregnancy, welcoming a new baby into your family. Like, there is many different aspects and hats that a doula can wear to provide emotional support. So I appreciate you educating us.
Thank you for having me. I was so excited when you asked me.
Yes, because I'll just share this piece that I remember going through my egg freezing for journey, and then after I was getting nervous about spotting, and you were like, you went right into you started asking the questions like, okay, well, tell me this, look at this, reach out to the nurse, and just even having someone who can give me some type of direction to kind of calm me down, because I was starting to kind of freak out. But
Which
I
makes
didn't know.
so valid. Yeah, you didn't know, and it's new. It's new.
Yeah, and that is one thing you said about valid. You were like, hey, like, if you think something's wrong, you have the right to ask the question and reach out if you're not sure. And I think that's so important, because we feel like maybe we're bothering, our service providers, or we don't get a response. But you're like, it's your right. If you feel like there's a concern,
that is their job. That's their job, is to help walk you through that. And I think that's like another good aspect about doulas, is they will remind you and be like, hey, that is you get to do that. That's part of your care plan. And I think that's really important. But I don't know. I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah, that's one thing I remembered. Like you were like, you went into full mode, like asking the questions, and you're like, if you feel like you need to reach out, you reach out to them. And I think that's important. So thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you, and hopefully we can have you again in the future.
Thank you for having me. I had so much fun and loved doing it.
All right. Have a good day. Thank
Thanks,
you.
you too. Bye.